So, how does a piece of cloth affect anything up in here? It took just a couple of Google searches to make me realize that the amount of factors are basically endless when it comes to why we wear the clothes we wear. And I'd be going way over the video limit if we sat down and talked about each of these factors. So to simplify it, I'm just going to break down the most significant factors of the psychology of fashion and clothing. How we identify ourselves in our day-to-day lives heavily reflects on the clothing we wear. For example, when wanting to give a good first impression on an employer or a supervisor, would you just go to the place looking like this? Well, unless you want to get declined on site, you'd probably go to the place looking more formal, nicer, and dress up in something looking like this to present yourself as approachable and friendly. But where did this association come from? Well, it all has to do with something called perception, which we learned in class. Growing up, you're probably conditioned to associate different colors with different meanings. Blue for calmness, black for rebellion, white for innocence, purple for royalty, and maybe red as seductive. This, of course, can change from culture to culture. Red is actually seen as a sign of purity in India, while it's also seen as a sign of luck and happiness in China. But the difference between the blue suit that you bought for $3,000 and the blue shirt that you bought at the discount section at Old Navy also has a big impact on human psychology. Our subconscious tends to associate people who wear lower class clothing as dangerous, poor, and violent, and our reaction is to feel more cautious, whereas someone who is wearing a suit and tie is perceived to be more intelligent and civil. Back to the employer scenario. Did you notice that the first guy was wearing all black in his outfit? Well, to the perception of the employer being raised in a Western society, this may imply that the person might disregard policies in the job and be more hostile compared to the person wearing navy blue, which will appear more open-minded and responsible. And this isn't a bad thing. In fact, this type of perception has evolved as a survival tactic and is a common way that we perceive clothing. In fact, a study done by Adam Glecksky, a professor at the Kellogg School of Management, found that people who wore white coats, believed to be from a doctor or a scientist, would increase their cognitive abilities while wearing it. So I decided to try out the legitimacy of this experiment myself. So without further ado, cue the experiment. For this experiment, I had a controlled group wearing their everyday clothes, while there was an experimental group wearing the lab coats while I tested them on a series of questions.
Red, yellow, green, blue, black, orange. Red, yellow, green, blue, black, orange.
121, 56, and 72.
We have 121. It's 60.
O positive. O negative.
Oh, negative. Correct.
I'm a Messi fan, so I'm just gonna say Argentina.
Correct.
Now, I wish I could say that, oh, the experiment was right, it was right. But it wasn't right. In fact, it was the opposite. The people who wore the lab coats while doing the experiment actually did worse than the people who didn't have it, which surprised me a lot, but this is science. This is what we do. What I assume may be the reason for this is because compared to the experiment that was done at Kellogg School of Management had more people involved compared to my experiment, which had around 10-ish people. The phenomenon that we would have seen if this experiment was a success is called in-clothes cognition. According to an article from Science Direct, embodied cognition, which is similar to in-clothes cognition, is an approach to cognition that has roots in motor behavior. This approach emphasizes that cognition typically involves acting with a physical body on an environment in which the body is immersed. In this context, the participants wearing the lab coat would have felt as if they were a scientist or a doctor, which would have tricked their brains into feeling more intelligent and confident. The importance of understanding how clothing impacts our minds is because it can also help the fashion industry be better connected with its consumers. Caroline Mayer, the author of The Psychology of Fashion, perfectly encompassed this in an interview with Kathleen Loon.
I think once the fashion industry is more in tune with what their customers actually want, rather than what they think they want, when they're more able to predict more accurately, production on demand rather than full supply, then this affects profits more so than the selling. So much money is wasted on overproduction. So if that comes out of the equation, a company can still be profitable.
Has a big impact. And this